Hello everyone. Today is May 5th. This is a Kubernetes SIG release meeting. This is a meeting that is recorded and available on the internet, so please be mindful of what you do and say. Please be sure to adhere to the Kubernetes code of conduct, and in general, just be awesome people. So we have a fairly light agenda today. I think the first thing that we want to cover is the new release schedule. And so we had some back and forth emails over the last few weeks, as well as meetings to discuss extending the Kubernetes 119 release cycle. Come to some agreement, and that PR was merged in the recent weeks. So if you want to check that out, that is available on the agenda. The TLDR is that the release cycle started on April 13th. The enhancements freeze is our next milestone on May 19th. June 25th is code freeze in week 11. Docs completion is July 9th. The release is going out on August 4th. And the retro is on August 20th. So looking at the schedule, you'll see that our usual 11 to 13 week cycle has been extended to 17 weeks. The right around that area is also happens to be KubeCon. So in trying to figure out the schedule, we had a variety of different calendar shenanigans trying to figure out exactly when the best time would be, and we decided that it would be easiest to release immediately before KubeCon, or rather the week before. I think it's the week before, to give people the other option was to have a blackout during KubeCon, right? Essentially a 2-week blackout, and then release the week after that. And as we were discussing this, it was decided that a code freeze for that long was detrimental. So the schedule that you see today is kind of like the compromise between keeping the existing schedule and extending it a little too far beyond what our usual is. That would have added, I believe, 8 weeks to the new schedule. So this one, you'll also see that we are changing exactly when the RC happens. The RC will happen on code freeze, right? This will also be when the branch cut happens. So that'll be branch creation. So we're still working out exactly what will change in that process. There are a few code changes on the Inago side, which is our release engineering tool for staging and releasing Kubernetes. And then there are also, I guess, mechanical or human changes that have to happen within the schedule, determining when the burn down meetings will start, when the additional RCs will go out, or the communications around how those are going out. And then we also, around code freeze, so we usually have code freeze and code thaw, right? So between code freeze is essentially when master slows down, right? We implement a set of merge restrictions on master so that only code that is targeted for the 119 milestone can merge, right? So it's on the milestone maintainers to appropriately milestone those PRs, and at which point they would merge. After code freeze, so code freeze is maybe a little bit of a misnomer. You're still allowed to merge code. It's just the way that you merge code has changed. There's an additional requirement, which is the milestone. Post code freeze, there's a period called code thaw, which is essentially when we lift that merge restriction from master. This release, we're maintaining code freeze throughout the entirety of the cycle, right? Or rather, from the point that code freeze starts to the end of the cycle, right? So that means that everything from that code freeze point, when we cut the RC, will need to be milestoned, and they will need to be milestoned for the the relevant release branch, right? So release -119 when it gets cut. So still also trying to think of when to shift from that point into doing cherry picks, right? At which point, like, master is reopened and you'll need to merge a PR into master and then cherry pick it over into the release branch, right? So stay tuned on that piece. I know that that's a lot of information. So we want to give some opportunity for questions. Taylor, do you want to add, Taylor or Jeremy, do you want to add to that?
Nothing I can think of. I had one more thing schedule related I had at the end of the schedule, and that is that until June 1st, going to be moving the release team meeting to bi-weekly, just give everybody a little bit more time, and just because it's a little bit slower. And then that correlates with all of those milestones too. So we'll get those updates in a timely way.
Awesome. Jeremy, anything from you?
Nope.
Awesome. All right, any questions?
Okay, from my side, it's not really about those stuff, but seeing the calendar varies. Why is release retro like 2 weeks after the release and at the same time as KubeCon? Was it supposed to be in some other time?
So this was, hold on. So actually, what initially was set in the schedule was KubeCon was targeted for the 13th through the 16th. So the idea was that we would have the retro post KubeCon, right? Now that KubeCon has moved, Taylor, Jeremy, looks like we have to move the retro date to fit that. So maybe we can either do, I guess we can do the retro on the 13th, if that sounds good, right? That's the Thursday of the week after the release.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd totally be down with that. I can kind of PR later today.
Yeah. So yeah. So Marco, that was because the KubeCon schedule had not changed at the point that we merged that. And thank you for the catch.
Okay, other than that, it looks great.
Awesome. So any, I guess it's worthwhile to give a little perspective on like why we did this, right? So lots of stuff going on in the world right now, and it's not really Kubernetes or upstream contribution to Kubernetes might not be the top of mind for everyone right now, and we wanted to give some opportunities to people across a set of different personas to kind of live life. So for the contributors, this allows more time to merge code, in a more thoughtful way. For reviewers and approvers, that gives them more time to merge code, more time to do reviews, more time to create enhancement proposals or update enhancement proposals. You'll see that kind of all of the deadlines have been expanded across the cycle, right? So the current May 19th enhancements freeze deadline was it might have been today actually, right? And code freeze has been extended to looks like I think we did about a month or so in addition. And then so it's the contributors, it's the it's the reviewers, approvers, SIG leads and chairs, but it's also consumers of Kubernetes, right? So the people who are, so basically every release creates every release is essentially a deprecation period, right? Once we let out, so the second we let out, or a little after we let out 118, 115 moves towards its deprecation period, right? So in that it would be deprecated at the next patch release, right? So when 118.1 goes out, or that's the point at which we would deprecate 115, right? So same for 119. 119 goes out, the clock starts for 116 going out of support, right? So we also had a discussion around preventing massive change for infrastructure from the consumer side, right? So people that from a vendor standpoint you might consider to be customers or clients, and then from a service provider perspective as well, right? Every time this clock starts, it's kind of, okay, we've got to go upgrade our clusters, or we have to make sure that this new version is available. So giving them more time to be able to do those changes across infrastructure was important to us too. So that said, if you've been following along that thread, you would have seen an update around 116 support. So we're continuing that support line for a little longer, extending it to about a year of support to give people opportunity to cut over, do upgrades. The LTS working group, which kind of is we have shared duties across release and SIG testing and cluster lifecycle and a few other places. The KEP that they had around the 1-year support has merged as of last week. So the timing it seems to be right. Reviews have been, the proposal has been thoroughly reviewed. So that is in and turns on as of the 119/116 cycle, right? So if you have any questions regarding LTS specifically, you can ask them in SIG release, the SIG release Slack channel, or the more appropriately the working group LTS Slack channel. Any questions on that? Okay. All right. So the next one up is the Cube 115 release, right? So during doing some updates for, let me just link the release tracking issue. So in doing some updates to the Kate's Cloud Builder image, right? So the Kate's Cloud Builder image is based on the Cube Cross image, right? So the Cube Cross image that was formerly within Kubernetes that has recently moved to Kubernetes release is responsible for cross building, right? Building for multiple architectures within Kubernetes, right? So the idea is that we make a change we also have these image building and pushing jobs. So the idea is that we make a change to the content of the Cube Cross image. When we merge that change, it triggers, so Proud does a check to see if files have changed within specific directories per repo, or however you configure your Proud job. And that triggers an image building and pushing job, right? So within Kubernetes, so basically we push that job to staging. We issue a promotion PR to take that staging job and promote it up to Kate's artifact prod, which is our GCR bucket for prod images, right? Once that's done, we then take the new, whatever the new tag is for that image, and we bump it within Kubernetes, right? So that gives us an opportunity to be able to basically be able to kind of build the image out of band and then do the testing of the cross image separately, right? So the problem that we're running into is first the cross images on the older cross images are built on Google infrastructure, right? Which means for us to bump those, we have to reach out to a Googler, we have to issue the PR, reach out to a Googler, have them kind of clear that PR within Kubernetes, build the change locally, push the image, promote it internally at Google, then we rerun tests against that PR, right? So that process kind of involves a few people, not all people who are as active on the release engineering side. from the Google perspective, and it's kind of, and then you have to deal with all of the tests that are within Kubernetes to get to the point where your image is promoted. So a while back, I want to say maybe a month and a half or so, we moved maybe longer, we moved the Cube Cross image to the Kubernetes community infrastructure, right? So some of the process is similar, but we also enabled it for post-submit image building, right? So that process that I was talking about. So now we're able to promote those images ahead of time and then issue a PR that is much smaller to Kubernetes. And because it's much smaller, it's easier to approve. Yeah, so all of that to say, the K8s Cloud Builder image is then built on top of the KubeCross image, right? So the K8s Cloud Builder image includes the tools that we need to build, to stage and release Kubernetes, right? So this is the image that we run as part of the GCP steps for the stage and release process, right? Now, here's the tricky part. Because we kind of key off of the KubeCross image version, there's a current requirement for the KubeCross version and the K8s Cloud Builder version to be in sync, right? So if we change content within K8s Cloud Builder, which we did, it would also require a bump of KubeCross, which is kind of counterintuitive based on the way the dependency works in the first place, right? So this popped up because we recently added a check. We added Scopio to the K8s Cloud Builder image to enable a check to ensure that the image manifests for each of the core images, API server, controller manager, so on and so forth, are available before the GCP jobs that do the stages and releases affirm that they're actually able to stage and release, right? So we want to make sure that those artifacts exist before we clear it. And the reason for that is that we're working on, if you hear VDF, the vanity domain flip. All right, so K8s.gcr.io, which is the production image repository that we use, is currently pointed at a Google GCR repo, right? So Google containers, right, so K8s.gcr.io is the alias for Google containers, right? So basically we're in process of transitioning that vanity domain over to community infrastructure, right? So that would become gcr.io K8s artifacts prod, right, / whatever namespace / staging project that you're using for your individual subproject, right? So once we move to new infrastructure, or once we move to the existing infrastructure, the new existing infrastructure, we can no longer, the staging and release GCP jobs push directly to the prod registry, right? So once we actually cut over, we'll no longer be able to do that, right? And we must promote images that are created as a result of the staging process. So to ensure that those staging images actually exist for the release managers to promote, we added this image manifest check within the staging process, right? And I know this is all long-winded, but the short version is because we added Scopio, it broke the 115 job, right? So the 115.12, and Carlos, you were working on 115.12, I believe, right? So I've picked up the release for a 115.12 because I've been working on, been kind of backed up with figuring out the schedule stuff. But now that that is out of the way, I've pushed PRs today, and I've been doing some testing on basically refactoring the KubeCross image a little bit. So basically, I'm taking all of the content from the K8s Cloud Builder image and moving that into KubeCross. So basically, we do a few things in Kate's Cloud Builder. We essentially, we remove Python 2, we ensure that Python 3 is installed, we add Scopio, and that honestly might be it. Let me just go through it really quick. There are a few additional dependencies that we add. We add the G-Cloud SDK stuff. We add Docker, and then Scopio, right? So that stuff is moved into KubeCross, and there's a PR up for that, which is the next item on the agenda. And yeah, so essentially, I can share my screen for this. And I think this new version of Zoom is having screen share issues, so I might freeze for a little bit, just a heads up. Okay, let me know if you can see that okay.
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
great. All right, screen, work with me. Okay. So there are a few things that we do here. And then I can kind of walk through the commits. Sorry about that. I am. So the first one is everyone can still see. Okay, right?
Yes.
Okay, great. So the first one is basically just sorting the Docker file a little bit, ensuring that we're doing kind of like, it's alpha sorted now for each of the apt packages, and just making sure that we're doing one per line, right? So it's easy to see exactly what we're adding or removing. There were some steps for cleaning, doing an apt clean and removing the app list updates. And that's just moved to the end of the Docker file now. Here is some more of the meat where we pull in the Kate's Cloud Builder functionality. So you can see, again, there are more updates, some spacing fixes, purging Python 2, adding Python 3, installing YQ and CRC mod, adding the G-Cloud SDK tools, Docker CLI, Scopio, and then finally doing the cleanup, right? So this next bit is interesting. This is called a variance file, variance.yaml, and if the GCB builder recognizes a variance.yaml file within the directory that you're targeting for build, it will essentially fork off the build into however many. You can either specify one of these config files. So if I say like variant equals go 114 or something, right? It will tell it to just build that variant, right? If you don't specify anything, it'll run all of the variants in the file, which is a good thing, right? Because normally we want to be able to so basically this allows us to build these Go versions in parallel, right? And we can specify a few of the things that are required within within the Docker file for kubectl, right? So like the kubectl version, we care about protobuf, etcd, and Scopio, right? And then obviously the Go version, right? So this allows us to come here and make a change to the kubectl version, right? If I bump this tag to 2, that will trigger a new build, right? And basically what it'll be doing is pulling in whatever that new base image is or updated base image is and rebuilding this, right? So say I want to build 114.3, right? I can bump the tag to 114.3, bump this to 114.3 and keep this revision at 1, and then it'll build the 114 image, right? Or I can bump all of these and it'll build all of them in parallel, right? Now, some further cleanup of the Docker file. So we're basically using a build argument for the Go version now, right? Setting that to the Go version that you see was specified in the variants.yaml. And we're setting protobuf as an argument, the etcd version as an argument instead of exporting these variables, or just keeping them as part of one line command. We pull those versions, we do some defaulting, but if you're interested in doing this locally, you're able to do this locally. You just have to, provide the correct environment variables, right? So we do some defaulting there, and then you can see that we're just changing a few of these build tags and then adding the build arguments, right? So that those get substituted in on the kubectl side. And then we're just pushing these, we're pushing the tags, and then we're also creating an image manifest and appending the AMD 64 builds to that image manifest, and then we're pushing all of that up, right? And then there's some cleanup of the cloud build, the GCB config for the cross build, by which is adding basically those variables that were specified in the variants.yaml, right? So this basically, so you can build it two ways. You can and then finally it does a check for to see that those images were actually pushed. So you can build it in two ways. You build it via GCB builder, which is the preferred way. You can the way this is set up now also enables you to build this locally if you want to test, right? And then finally, we swap out. So I'm using the staging one now since this PR is still in flight, but we're swapping out the Kate's Cloud Builder image for the kubectl image. That way, we don't have to worry about maintaining two sets of image versions when we're doing the stage and release process, right? So once this merges, that should fix the ability to do the 115 build. And then you can see that there is a follow-up PR on the Kubernetes side, which is testing the build version, which is testing the new kubectl version, right? So I know that was a lot and maybe not the usual content that we do for SIG release global meeting, but are there any questions on that? Okay, all right, no questions, awesome. All right, so that is personally all I have. Are there things that are not on the agenda that people wanted to discuss? Okay, are we sure? All right. Okay, so I would say there are a few things that we can, there are quite a few things that can be trimmed backlog-wise. Marco, do you want to talk a little bit about some of the work that you've been doing on the backlog?
So yeah, I think I did a quick update on last meeting. It was release engineering, but maybe there are some more folks now. Well, I have started going through backlog and seeing right now focused on release engineering one. Maybe I can do something similar for others. Not sure that we have SIG release one, but I'm going through, started with non-assigned issues and seeing like what's the state, is this still relevant, if they're close to getting closed by bot or something like that, ping them and keep a list of them. And I have created an issue in the SIG release repository. And the next step is that I'm going to take a look at assigned issues for release engineering project and to ping them, see can something be reassigned and see what's the overall state. But I had planned to do it on Monday, yesterday, but I had a lot of stuff to do and wasn't really able to get started. But the plan is either today or tomorrow. The problem is today I have late classes on the university, so it's probably going to be tomorrow. But yeah, I'm going to give this a try and probably update the list with some other issues.
Sounds good. Thank you for the working on that. So if you were part of the release engineering, I think we did in the release engineering meeting, Marky did a demo of Triage Party. So Triage Party is a tool that the Minikube maintainers have been using, as well as some of the, I believe, Scaffold as well. And Triage Party essentially is a nice pane of glass that, if you've used something like Kubernetes, it's kind of an extension of that with a little bit more functionality. It gives you the ability to essentially look over a set of queries that will allow you to do triage for some subset of repos or some subset of issues, right? So we also had Thomas, who is the maintainer for Triage Party, talk about some of that. And yeah, I think this would dovetail nicely with the work that you're doing, Marco. So I would say get together with Marky. Marky is currently cutting the 119 Alpha 3 release. So he might be a little busy today, but I would say, as you're free, see if you can chat with him later in the week. And maybe y'all can work on bringing Triage Party more formally into SIG release to test out.
Okay, sounds good.
All right, cool. All right, last call for topics. Okay, easy peasy. All right, 25 minutes back. Thank you everyone for your time. Thanks for hanging out as always. We will catch you at the next one.
Thanks, everybody. Later.